Is half a season enough to make conclusive judgments about the future of a player's career? Definitely not, but it's enough to say something, especially when we combine it with their prospect reports. I'll be asking Shelly Verougstraete about a whole bunch of exciting rookies on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast. Welcome, everybody, to the Sunday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast, brought to you by Pick Six. My guest today, Shelly Verougstraete of the Fantasy Feud podcast. Shelly, thanks for joining me. How's it going?
Hey, Erik. It's going pretty good. It's, baseball is about to get started on this Sunday afternoon, and yeah, it's almost the 4th of July, which is pretty cool too. So yeah, it's going pretty good.
Yeah, peak baseball season in a way when everything else has stopped and it's just us for a little bit, but also heading into the dog days of summer. Interesting combo there. But our main topic for the day, we will be looking at a whole bunch of rookies and asking questions like, hey, were they supposed to be this good? Or wait, weren't they supposed to be better than this? Because Shelly, you have spent many years covering prospects. And one thing that I always want to talk to prospect people about is these rookies, because you all have a longer sense for what these players have looked like over multiple seasons. The rest of us, we're aware of these prospects, but mostly we rely on you all, and then we see the major league numbers. And so getting the chance to combine 80 games worth of data with several years worth of minor league knowledge, I'm excited to see where we go with that. But first, we've got some headlines to deal with, starting in Cleveland, where we have a shakeup in the rotation. Gavin Williams back from injury. He was on the 60-day IL with elbow issues. And it's Triston McKenzie who has been sent down. Really a tough year, multiple years for Triston McKenzie. And man, his star has fallen pretty far. Optimism for his future has got to be hard to find.
Yeah, I mean, the last 2 years have been atrocious, over 5 ERA and over a 1.5 whip. That is unacceptable if, real life and especially in fantasy. Honestly, I didn't expect Triston McKenzie to be this bad again. I have him in a couple places. So I've been taking that 5 ERA on the chin, which has not been kind. But yeah, I was thinking, maybe like Carlos Carrasco would be put in the bullpen or something like that. Once we found out that Gavin Williams was going to be missing in a extended period of time, like when he came back, I just thought one of the other guys. But nope, it looks like Triston McKenzie is going to be going down. Hopefully he can get something back in, AAA and come back and show off what he did in 2022. But yeah, it was, kind of surprising that it was him.
Yeah, a 5.11 ERA for McKenzie through 16 starts this season, and looking at his Sierra, couldn't be more deserved because that sits at exactly 5.11 as well. So some real struggles here for McKenzie. Interesting, I guess, to see that this is just a demotion and not some sort of phantom injury or perhaps real injury, because, of course, it was injury troubles last year, shoulder and then an elbow. He was one of those guys where it looked like he was heading towards surgery sooner or later. So to see him just head to a demotion is a little bit confusing to figure out what to do for fantasy purposes. Or do we just say, man, the numbers are so bad and the uncertainty about when he's going to come back is so high that we could just cut everywhere?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I was even before this news, he was on, I work on FAP throughout the entire week, and he was just I need to get him off of my team. So now I definitely need to get him off my team because like you said, you don't know when he's coming back and what he's going to look like. Will he stay healthy? It's too many questions.
Yeah, sounds about right to me. But at least there's the positive here, and that we get to see Gavin Williams again. Excited to see what he can do after a promising rookie season last year where he had a 3.29 ERA in 16 starts. The next headline that we faced over the last 24 hours or so, that's definitely the wrong word. The next headline on the list today is Juan Soto is on the bench again today with his hand issue. He was hit in the hand a couple days ago X-rays were negative yesterday, but he's continuing to sit. And the latest news is he might go get an MRI or a CT scan. So I guess for our purposes, at the very least, make sure you have another outfielder just in case we get bad news on Soto.
Yeah, pretty much. And do you know if they play on Monday or do they have a Tuesday?
I will check that real quick. The Yankees are off on Monday, it looks like.
Okay, so I don't know. Maybe we get some more news, but yes, definitely have a backup ready to go because he might, even sit like on Tuesday and stuff like that. So
yeah, we'd rather they have a game on Monday, right? Because then we would find out Monday afternoon. But this way, you're going to have to figure out on Monday, am I throwing somebody else in there or am I going to use Juan Soto? So unfortunate timing there. And of course, if he does end up heading to the injured list, this was supposed to be the opportunity for Jason Dominguez, but he is injured as well for a while with his oblique strain. So if Soto does hit the IL, I guess it's going to be more Trent Grisham or maybe some Oswaldo Cabrera or something. I'm not sure if there's a big fantasy impact there.
Yeah, I don't really think that fantasy-wise, there's no one who's going to, take Juan Soto's spot that's really worth much time.
All right, so we can move on to the next bit of injury news, and that is Mike Trout. We finally got an update on Mike Trout. It's been a little bit, but we actually had 2 updates on Mike Trout yesterday. One is that he's getting close to returning to baseball activities, and then as a result, we also have something of a timeline. He is aiming to return from the injured list by the end of July. So basically within a month from his torn meniscus. He underwent surgery back in May, missed 2 months already. There'll be some sort of rehab assignment here. And I would imagine that most people hear any Mike Trout related injury news with a whole bunch of skepticism and add a month or 2 to his estimated timeline. Are you doing that too, or are you getting excited here?
Yeah, I'm still a little bit nervous about the late July kind of timeline because I think it was like a couple weeks ago he was, kind of not complaining, but he was saying that the process has been slower than he expected to be going, like his, building back up to, start running and stuff like that. So I mean, I don't have him anywhere, so I guess I really don't have to worry about it. But if I had him on the IL, I would probably expect him back in August, if honestly. But I mean, if he does come back in late July, I'll be excited because he's an extremely fun player to watch.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be, say, taking this news and looking at who has Mike Trout in your leagues with trades and thinking, can I maybe try to get this guy? Does that still seem a little bit too much of a risk for you?
I mean, if I needed the help and there was no one on the waiver wire, yeah, I don't mind. And I had a spot on my bench that I could afford to play with an injured player, take a flyer. I wouldn't mind doing that because he was hitting for power, at the beginning of the season. I doubt that he's going to steal any of those bases that he was, coming off this injury. But Mike Trout is Mike Trout. If he's healthy and on the field, he's going to produce.
Yeah, I think maybe in leagues with playoffs where I had a comfortable lead or something like that, then maybe I would look to make a luxury move. Like, hey, I don't need all the help now to get into the playoffs. I can coast to September, and if Mike Trout's available, wouldn't that be nice? I kind of doubt you're going to have much luck right now because the Mike Trout owner is going to see this news as well and get excited themselves. But hey, at least there's something to say about Mike Trout for the first time in a little bit, and that's always good. One more bit of news here. We had the Mets with a shakeup in their rotation. Tyler McGill sent down. Seems like Tyler McGill just doing the Tyler McGill thing that he does every year, which is getting people moderately interested for fantasy reasons because, hey, there's a little bit under the hood that's kind of interesting, and then proceeding to produce pretty unimpressive numbers, a 5.08 ERA and a 1.44 whip. That looks pretty Tyler McGill-esque to me. Yep. But the exciting part of this is that we could see Christian Scott soon, hopefully, almost definitely.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see Scott come back. I have him in one keeper league, and I actually picked him up in a couple of, my redraft leagues. So I am really excited to have him back active on my roster because he was pitching pretty well. I mean, it was kind of like a surprising kind of send down. It was him and Brett Beatty sent down at the same time. I think it was because of like scheduling stuff, but he stayed down now longer than I was expecting, but I'm excited to have him back.
Yeah, he was sent down, I think, right before the London series because the Mets weren't going to need 5 or 6 starters for a bit. But then why did they keep him down for the entire month of June? Not really sure. Making a bunch of short starts, 3 2/3, 4 1/3, 4 innings in his last few. I guess this is a Max Meyer style move like the Marlins were doing. Just send the guy that you called up too early back down to the minors for a little bit. I guess we're a little bit worried about him getting right back into rhythm, but probably not too worried. But Christian Scott, how good is he supposed to be if he is fully unleashed in the second half? Is he somebody who's going to really change a team's fantasy fortunes, perhaps?
I mean, I really think so. Like Christian Scott, it has a very unique career because he started out as like a reliever and then they just put him in, made him a starter, and he's been electric for, I don't know, like starting like last year, it was like really, really coming on. He had a fantastic year. So if he comes back and he is like ready to go, because you did say that he was pitching like short outings, so it might take him a little bit to maybe get up to that 6-7 inning range, maybe a couple starts. But I mean, I'm just going to put him in because he was electric when he was up.
Yeah, and if he has been dropped anywhere, certainly I would be going to pick him up this weekend, even if we don't quite have the official confirmation. I think with McGill being sent down and with the news early in the week that Scott has a good chance of coming back at some point during this stretch of games without an off day, seems to be all adding up to Scott's imminent return. Speaking of imminent, we are about to move on to the main topic of the day. But first, this message from Pick 6. Did you ever play the over-under game with your friends? Think I can eat that slice of pizza in under 30 seconds? Or I know it'll take you over a minute to down that 2-liter. If you have, then you're going to love Pick 6, the new fantasy game from DraftKings. Here's how to play during baseball season. Pick between 2 and 6 players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat like runs, hits, strikeouts, and more. Track your picks and play against others for a shot to win huge cash prizes. That's all there is to it. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code RWPicks. New customers play $5 and get 50 in Pick 6 credits. That's code RWPicks for new customers to play $5 and get 50 in Pick 6 credits, only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. 1 per new customer. Non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits expire in 6 months. Limited time offer. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 18 plus in most eligible states. Not available in all states, including New York and Connecticut. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6draftkings.com/promos. Almost nailed that one. We'll work on it. Back to the main topic here, where we are focusing on rookies today. Some of the rookies have been underperforming. I suppose that's been the main rookie-related storyline this season, is all those guys that you were pushing way off the draft boards in draft season. I mean, one of them I don't even know if we're going to talk about today because Jackson Holliday hasn't really spent any time in the majors. He spent about 10 days and then went right back down. We'll get to Wyatt Langford and Jackson Chourio later, but there actually are some rookies who are doing pretty well this season, just not necessarily the ones that were the most hype. So let's start with those. And I'm going to start with Joey Ortiz, who was rated highly enough to headline or co-headline a Corbin Burns trade. So he was supposed to be pretty good, I think. But a 835 OPS, hitting 275, 7 homers, 5 steals, impeccable plate discipline. This guy looks like he's really quite good already. So what was the Joey Ortiz that we were promised before his big league debut?
Honestly, it was definitely something like this. A decent amount of power and some speed. He was definitely known more for his glove. And I think that he got maybe a tad bit dinged for being in the Orioles farm system because they had so many great prospects. He kind of got like lost in the shuffle a bit. I love the trade for the Brewers at the time because they needed like a third baseman, really. And he has really, really stepped up. So from, like a long-term, like a dynasty type thing, this is definitely a guy that I would love, to get on my team because, again, defense, that is like his bread and butter. So he's going to play pretty much every day. And he's going to put up, decent batting averages, a little bit of power, a little bit of speed. That's perfect. That's exactly what you want in a player like this.
And by defense, are we talking just good third base defense, or are we talking he's going to be the shortstop if and when Willy Adames moves on?
Right. Yeah. I know he can. He's really a really good shortstop. I don't know if they're going to move their second baseman over, but he can definitely play shortstop, no problem. So yeah, he could definitely scoot over if they need to do that next season and beyond.
Yeah, just seeing whether they've used him there at all this year. He's made 3 appearances, but no starts there. 57 starts at third and 4 at second base. But as far as that bat, just how good do you think the bat is going to be? Because right now it seems like it's plate discipline first, which in a rookie is a skill I love to see because that's often an old man skill. So if you've already got that figured out, presumably that leads to good things in the future. But it also might mean that his game is just based on picking the right pitches to swing at, and he's not going to do that much damage with them. If you look at, say, his hard hit rate, 39%, barrel rate, 6%, slightly above or slightly below average there, but within the realm of average. Is that basically what we're looking at? Somebody who's going to make the most out of what's not really much more than decent power?
Yeah, I think so. Like coming up throughout the minors, he was known for, just being able to put the bat on the ball. He, his, I guess if we round up 14% walk rate seems a bit high, just based on just what we've seen in the minors. But so yeah, that might come down. But again, I still he can definitely put the bat on the ball. So I think that the averages will definitely stay around this 260, 270, 280 range.
All right, so maybe the verdict on Joey Ortiz is that actually he was supposed to be closer to this good. He just was a little bit overlooked because of a crowded system. I think, does that sum it up? I think that's good to know then. Joey Ortiz deserved a bit more hype, as he's proving. Let's move on to the next guy, Jackson Merrill, who started getting some hype this season early in draft season when it became clear that the Padres were seriously considering calling him up right on opening day, despite the fact that he'd only played 46 AA games. He showed very good bat to ball skills in the minors, but my thought during draft season was, okay, this is kind of cool. We'll see if he's maybe a very deep league guy who plays some and holds his own, but I'd say he's more than held his own so far, hitting 288 with 12 homers and 9 steals in half a season for Jackson Merrill. So we can say that's pretty close to a 2020 player while hitting 288. Was Jackson Merrill supposed to be this good?
Yeah, he was definitely supposed to be this good with the bat, and we've seen it throughout his minor league career. It's just great averages, not crazy bad, strikeout rates, and a decent amount of power. He has just totally blown my mind out of the water, because when he was at shortstop, the talk was they were going to have to move him off of shortstop because he really wasn't a good defender. And then the Padres were like, oh, we're just going to put him in center field. I'm like, I don't know about that, but he is really good. He has a 3 outs above average this year, which puts him in the top 20 for center fielders specifically. And I'm just like, so this guy is playing in the majors for the first time, playing in a position he's never played before, and hitting 288. It's absolutely mind-boggling. I've been very, very impressed with Jackson Merrill.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anything about his character reports, but I assume they must be pretty high if he's able to jump straight into the majors at age 21 and seamlessly handle a transition to the outfield without losing anything at the plate. And then how about at the plate? What sort of a hitter was he supposed to be? I'm seeing in the minors, mostly what stands out is very low strikeout rates, but 12 homers in half a season. And San Diego, that's a player who has at least average power, isn't it?
Yeah. He had maybe even slightly a below average power, but he had a great hit tool. I never would have guessed that he would have had 12 homers by now, so far this season. So, I mean, if we're expecting, like, if he keeps at this pace, he's probably going to get around like 20. I never would have thought that, especially in his first season. So it's a really, really great thing to seeing some more power that, I never expected him to actually show.
So maybe more of an unexpected development for Merrill than with
Mhm.
Ortiz, we could say. He's also several years younger, too, so that maybe
Sure.
shouldn't surprise us. Merrill's just 21. He was a first-round pick, but only in 2021. So this is somebody who is moving quite quickly, and this might be one of those cases where there was just more in the profile that we just didn't have time to see before he
Right.
got to the majors.
Yeah, definitely.
So we move on to our next outfielder here. And while Merrill and Ortiz, I know were real prospects, just maybe not the top prospects like the Wyatt Langfords, the Jackson Chourios of the world. This next guy, Jacob Young, I don't even know if Jacob Young was a prospect. So maybe bringing on a prospect person to tell me all the things you've thought about Jacob Young over the last several years is incorrect here. But Jacob Young, kind of emerging from nowhere to take the opportunity in that Washington outfield. And to be fair, much more fantasy appeal than real life appeal here. A 667 OPS because it's basically all singles. He's hitting 271. But hey, for us fantasy people, 19 steals. That'll do it, even if he's only hitting one homer. So Jacob Young, am I right in thinking that he was not even a prospect at all?
Yeah, he wasn't on pretty much any of the top prospect lists. I had like seen his name before, because I've looked through like rosters and stuff, and I was just like, okay, he might get a shot because the Nationals are kind of in like a rebuild mode. He might just play for a little bit and whatever. But he's actually hit better than I expected. I mean, again, there's like no power. He's only has one home run in his major league career. But yes, the steals are great. Because Washington is running like it's nobody's business. Like they get on base, they try to steal. They're trying to, try to get as many runs as they can. But yeah, I never expected him to hit as well. I knew the speed definitely was going to be there, but I didn't think that he would be able to stick as long as he has, to be honest.
Yeah, and his strikeout rate isn't anything amazing. 19% is better than league average, but you have more confidence in this profile if he was down, 12, 14, 15%, just putting a ton of balls in play, slapping his way to first, and then running around the bases. I am not all that confident in him sticking around long time, but I certainly have to pay more attention to him than I did before. But for you, as someone who has even more awareness of every player as they enter the majors, because you've been looking at these guys in the minors, what do you do strategically when someone like Jacob Young pops out of nowhere? Do you maybe doubt them even more than us non-prospect people because you're more familiar that, like, wait a second, he wasn't supposed to do that? Or are you still pretty open to a pop-up guy like this?
I don't know. I think that I was just I don't have him anywhere. I didn't pick him up last year. I didn't pick him up this year because I was just like, no, this is not going to work. But he's proven me wrong. So I guess people who are just looking at they don't know like the history, right? That they might be more into it. Yeah. So I don't have him anywhere. So sad on me.
That's good to know. Well, we'll see. Maybe it'll turn out to be right. I mean, again, there's all he really does is hit singles and run around the bases. And eventually, with that James Wood guy, should we take a quick interlude here to talk about
Yeah.
their line section because it was yesterday's, and I think that to get called up, and this is probably going to send Jacob Young to the bench more regularly, or maybe not. Maybe it'll send someone else. We will see. But very least, James Wood, an extremely exciting young prospect who's about to set the world on fire potentially for the Nationals. But just how exciting is James Wood?
He's very exciting because he has the makings of being like a top tier player. He has so much power, and he is stealing a few bases. I don't know if he's going to be like a burner, right? So he's not going to be like a 5-tool player, but I call him like maybe like a 4.5-tool player. But the power is going to be there. He might struggle a bit at the start because the jump from AAA to the majors is so huge. And then in AAA, they're still using the automatic ball calling system, so it's going to be a totally different thing that he's going to be dealing with. So if he struggles out the gate, don't be too surprised. But I think Washington is just going to let him just go and see what happens.
Yeah, if he struggles out of the gate, I would imagine it would be because he struggles to make contact, which happens when you're 6'7". And that happened to him a lot at the lower reaches of the minors. And even in AA last year, a 34% strikeout rate. He cut that all the way to 18% at AAA this season. And I just don't know what to make of that. As such a dramatic improvement in exactly the way we want him to improve. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that's incredibly exciting, or it's just a 2-month blip and I'm getting way ahead of myself. Which side would you fall on that?
I would say it's maybe like a 2-month blip, and the pitching in AAA is not that great either. So I think it's I was still very impressed. Maybe he can stick around like 20-25% K rate. That would still be great. It's much better than the 30.
Yeah, I think definitely if he can be in the high 20s with the power he has and some speed as well, that's going to be more than enough. But there's certainly the downside risk with James Wood is that he ends up striking out over a third of the time and needs a little bit more seasoning in the minors. He is still just 21 years old after all. Let's move from the hitters to the pitchers. We've got a trio of pitchers who I want to ask you the same question. Were they supposed to be this good? And let's start with Luis Gil, who I suppose has had a bad start or two recently and maybe doesn't look quite as ridiculous in his numbers, but still a 3.15 ERA, a 1.12 whip, 28% strikeout rate in 16 starts in his first season back from Tommy John surgery. An old rookie at age 26 and a rookie who debuted back in 2021 because baseball's weird rookie eligibility rules. He had 29 innings that season, 4 innings the next year, and then got hurt. So a 26-year-old rookie who debuted 3 years ago really seems to be surpassing what I understood his minor league expectations to be. But what was Luis Gil supposed to be as a prospect?
I thought that he was just going to end up in the bullpen just because he has missed so much time, and his biggest thing coming up through the minors was his control. So I was just like, oh, this guy, if you put him in the bullpen with that elite fastball and that slider combination, just put him there, he'll be fine. But yeah, so he's definitely surpassed my expectations for him. I'm thinking that we're starting to see he'll hit that wall because he hasn't really pitched much because he's recovering from Tommy John and stuff like that. So it might be a little bumpy summer, but I think that the Yankees have something here for the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, as you said, he was supposed to have control bad enough that it might send him to relief. And I mean, he kind of does, right? Look at his walk rate, 12.7%. That's about as bad as it gets for a qualified starter. Yeah. That is the kind of control that would send you to the bullpen, but you're not going to send Luis Gil to the bullpen when he's got a 3.15 ERA in half a season. Exactly. Do you think that there's still some risk of that, though? Because the flaw is still there, even if it's working so far? Or if you had him in a dynasty league, would you be saying, no, Luis Gil, he's a starter for the next 5 years?
I mean, there's definitely still a risk because we have seen starters, prospects come up and they are light the world on fire, and then the next season they just they fall back into their old ways. They, pitching, it's kind of like a groove thing. They just get in the groove and that's fine. But once the off season hits, they lose that groove and then they go back to where they were. So, I mean, I think that the Yankees are going to give him every opportunity to start because they have seen what he has done this year. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him go to the bullpen. So if I had him in a dynasty league and, I didn't need him for this year, like maybe I'm rebuilding or something, I would try to maybe shove him a little bit because this profile there is still a whole lot of risk in it.
All right. Yeah, fair enough. I think we see, Blake Snell types who are able to win Cy Youngs with walk rates in this range.
Exactly.
So could work, but we also see plenty of players who don't. Let's go to another pitcher. Jared Jones has also had a bit of an arc to his season, really set the world on fire in his first few starts, and then was still quite good. And then in his last few, actually has not been all that good at all, and now is taking a break. Did not start this week. Had his turn in the rotation skipped. Seems like just one skip just to keep his workload in check for the remainder of the season, and not any hint at an injury. But with Jared Jones, is he settling back down towards the level he was supposed to be as a prospect, or is he still establishing himself as a different player than the one he was supposed to be in the minors?
I think that he is still, establishing himself. He, like Heel, maybe not as bad, had trouble throwing strikes. But I think it was last season or 2 seasons ago, he made a mechanical, adjustment to, be able to throw more strikes. And, he's hitting, levels, of pitching that, if he keeps going, he's going to surpass his 122 innings in 2022. So maybe he's just hitting that little rookie wall, right? I still think that he is long-term. I think that he is going to be a fantastic, pitcher for the Pirates. They're going to have a 1-2 punch with Skenes and Jones and Mitch Keller, because they extended Mitch Keller. So 1, 2, 3. That's an awesome rotation. Maybe this year again it's going to be bumpy because the Pirates are going to play with the innings. We've already seen it. It burned me this week because I thought I was going to get a start from him and he did not start. So I think going forward we still might see a little bit more, these ups and downs from him. But I think long-term, it's going to be a good number 2, number 3 type starter.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it, because after those first 5 starts, it looks like they were going to have a 1-1 punch in Pittsburgh. It looked like Jared Jones was an ace on the same level that Paul Skenes was going to be. And I think maybe combining the player we thought he was supposed to be coming in the minors with the player he's been after those first 5 starts, we can maybe start to be a little bit more realistic. I mean, I suppose that the tail end upside here, the 95th percentile outcome for Jones, probably still is an ace, but certainly my confidence in him being more than a number 2 has taken a hit. And I think that it's important to remember the guy he used to be. Although with pitchers, this is a philosophical question for you, I guess. How long do you still think about their prospect reports? Because certainly I hope it's at least a year or so, because that's why I brought you on today to talk about. But with hitters, I think hitters tend to have a little bit more continuity throughout their careers, whereas pitchers, they can add pitches, they can change grips, they can get hurt and change their deliveries and everything. Do you find that your knowledge about these guys coming up is expiring faster these days with modern pitching development and that sort of thing? Or do you find that it's still pretty useful to remember, no, wait a second, Jared Jones wasn't supposed to be an ace, guys. What are you doing?
Right. No, I think after, I do think that it's after a while, the prospect reports doesn't really matter. The only thing that I do pay attention to is how well they throw strikes, because as much as you can add pitches and you could do like the mechanical tweak like Jared Jones, you usually don't go from like a 12% walk rate down to a 5% walk rate and hold that, consistently year after year. So I do think that you can add different little things, but if you can't throw strikes consistently, that's something that will always stick in the back of my mind for pitchers.
Yeah, for sure. And with Jared Jones, he had that blip where he was throwing way more strikes, and then maybe seems like that is not something he's holding on to, just like you said. Our final pitcher in the were they supposed to be this good category is Gavin Stone, and there's maybe some caveats here in that Gavin Stone is outperforming his peripherals by a decent amount, a 2.73 ERA, but Sierra actually has him all the way up at 4.23. So maybe even Gavin Stone isn't that good now, but he's got a 112 whip as well. The strikeouts are a bit low, but he's certainly been performing over the course of half a season here. And he was a real prospect, but not a huge one. How good was Gavin Stone supposed to be? Was it something like what we're seeing now or something different?
Yeah, I never thought that he would put like this string of good starts together. I thought he was going to be a major league starter, maybe like a number 4 or number 5. But what he's doing right now is just blowing my mind. Coming up, like he's always had like the changeup was his like number 1 pitch. And whenever I see a prospect that has a changeup that is like demolishing like low A and double A, I'm like, okay, you're kind of like faking it if that makes sense. But yeah, he's doing very well. 9 wins. I have him on a couple of of redraft leagues, and I'm loving the ratios and the wins. I'm still watching every single whatever team that he's going to face up next, because I still don't believe it. I'm just lucky that I got him for like a couple of dollars, right at the right before he got his role in the rotation. So I don't think that it's going to stick around even long term. So just enjoy it while you have it, I guess.
All right, so Gavin Stone may be more found money than a real breakout here. We are going to move on to the negatives, the prospects who were supposed to be better than this, weren't they? Right after this message from Home Run Forecast. Can certain weather conditions lead to more home runs? The atmosphere can affect how far a ball flies by 20%. Home Run Forecast measures the weather conditions at a ballpark to tell us if the atmosphere is good or bad for ball flight during a game. An index value that rates the air is created for each game and ballpark and is displayed on a scale from 1 to 10. Home Run Forecast Premium site offers index values by the hour for each game, 24-hour forecasts, wind direction, and speed, and even whether the roof will be open at certain stadiums. Home Run Forecast is offering a special for the start of baseball season. You can get access to the premium site for the entire season for only $28, a savings of nearly 30%. Go to homerunforecast.com/RotoWire now to sign up. Welcome back to the Sunday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Pick 6. Erik Halterman with my guest, Shelly Verougstraete. Today we're talking about rookies and the players they were supposed to be as prospects. We've talked about the ones who seem to be doing better than maybe their prospect buzz suggested. Now let's move on to some who are definitely doing worse, and we won't even be able to talk about Jackson Holliday because we're talking about players who are doing worse in the majors, and he did so worse in the majors that he hasn't been in the majors for a while now, and there really wasn't enough data to say anything. So we'll postpone the conversation on him for another few months, but we'll talk instead about Wyatt Langford and Jackson Chourio mainly, but let's take them one at a time, starting with Wyatt Langford, who I guess he does now have a real homer, right? He's up to 3 homers on the year, one of them inside the park, so 2 real homers, and he is up to 7 steals, hitting 248, just a 666 OPS. I mean, it's not all bad for Wyatt Langford, but certainly people were drafting him as if he was a star already. He's not been a star already, but who was Wyatt Langford supposed to be, if not this year, but at peak? Oh, I think you may still be muted from the ad there.
Sorry about that. Honestly, I don't think anyone knows what Wyatt Langford is supposed to be, because he played in college. He was phenomenal in college, and then he played a half a season in the minors and just blew past everyone's expectations for him. So I'm not exactly sure what he's supposed to be. I do think that he's going to be better than what he's currently doing, which is, the 248, 313, with, just 3 homers and 7 stolen bases. I think that he's going to be better. It's just, this is like the best pitching that this guy's ever seen. And he was in college like last year. So it's, so I don't blame him. I wasn't one of the managers who was like pushing him up draft boards, because I'm just like, I usually like to see a player play a little bit in the majors before drafting him that high, especially. So I think he's going to be better than this. Is he going to be who he was in the minors? Probably not, because that was absolutely insane what he was doing. But I think he's going to get to a place where he's hitting 25, 30 home runs, stealing a little bit, and, having like a 260 average, maybe a little bit higher. But there are brighter days in his future. It's just taking him, just a little bit longer to get to those days.
Should we have any worries yet that he was overhyped, that the player he was supposed to be was a little bit more than he was actually going to be able to achieve, just because of the excitement that surrounds a player who has such this little track record? Or do we think that pretty much this is all just a reminder to stay patient, and that the Wyatt Langford who was promised is going to show up eventually, but why did you guys think he was going to show up so soon?
Yeah, I think it's definitely more of like, just be patient. Maybe he was a tad bit overhyped from like a redraft perspective, maybe not from a dynasty perspective, because I think that he is going to be a multiple time all-star, just a really, really good player. Just this year, I think we all of us as fantasy managers saw all of those juicy, yummy stats, in the minors, and we're like, oh, it's going to translate. Sometimes it doesn't translate just that fast. So be patient. He'll get there. Maybe not this year, but eventually he will.
All right, and then on a similar level, Jackson Chourio got plenty of hype, and he has stuck around in the majors all season, despite there being some stretches where he kept finding himself on the bench. It looked like maybe the Brewers were going to send him to the minors to sort out his swing or something like that, but he's stuck around at the major league level, maybe turning things around a bit lately, and his fantasy value, he has kept that from bottoming out by showing some decent power and speed. 9 homers and 8 steals in half a season means he could get close to 2020 by the end of the year, only hitting 241, a 677 OPS, so not much in the bat yet. So kind of a similar deal here. Are you seeing anything that makes you at all worried that, wait a second, wasn't this guy supposed to be better? Or do you think that the hype was just early?
I think the hype was just like a tad bit early. Like you said, he's not killing, he's not killing you. He's still giving you, the home runs and the stolen bases, which that's what we expected, because that's what he did in the minors. The strikeout rate kind of concerns me a bit. It might just happen, just might be higher than it was in the minors, and might just stick around like that, because I've watched plenty of Brewers games, and yeah, sometimes I see him give overmatch. But again, he's very young. He's 20, which is crazy to think about. And he's still holding his own. And, the Brewers did give him like this massive extension. So maybe that's why they didn't send him down. But even if that what is the case, like they still kept him on the roster. They still feel some type of confidence in this kid. So again, it might not be this year, but I think that going forward, he's just going to be a 5-tool player: speed, home runs, and maybe the average might be the one downside to that. But I just think that he's just going to be an excellent player going forward.
So if you were, say, rebuilding in a keeper and dynasty league, or keeper or dynasty league, and there's a contender with a Wyatt Langford or a Jackson Chourio, despite their first half struggles, you'd still view either of those guys as very much worthy of targeting as, the centerpiece of your rebuild. If you're trying to trade your best veteran, maybe multiple best veterans, to get one underperforming rookie who's going to help you out the next 5 years, you're still fully on board with Langford and Chourio?
Oh yeah, totally. I would probably go more towards Chourio versus Langford, because I think Chourio is going to give you the speed. I don't know if Langford's necessarily going to give you all that speed, but both of those players, I would love to have them on a rebuilding dynasty squad.
All right, let's move to the next guy who I thought was supposed to be better than this, and that's Colt Keith, who also got a pre-debut extension from the Tigers, just like Jackson Chourio did from the Brewers. Colt Keith, through half a season, he's got a 595 OPS, and that's not very good, hitting 232, 4 homers and 4 steals, and because we're right at the halfway mark, we can double those and say he's on a full season pace for 8-8 with a 232 average. I don't think Colt Keith was very hyped up in the short term for this season, but even so, wasn't he supposed to be better than this?
I mean, I thought so. Like his struggles is mind-boggling to me because he's always been like a really, really good hitter, and definitely had the home run juice as well. And he's just on the struggle bus. He's never. I don't even know if he's going to get off of it this year because I mean, even a 278 OBP is just that's awful. uh,
Yeah.
so I think that the Tigers are just gonna let him go out there, but I don't know. Like his massive just tumble from what he did in the minors. Yeah, I'm scared. I'm scared to be honest.
Yeah, just worried about his plate discipline seems bad. He regularly was having double-digit walk rates in the minors, and now just a 5% walk rate. I mean, some of that could just be pitchers are completely not scared of him, so they're just pounding the zone or something. Also, maybe as a reminder that walk rates in particular are a tough stat to parse in the minors, I suppose.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Especially like the lower you get, like walk rates really don't matter. Strikeout rates do, but not walk rates. They're very, very fluky.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Colt Keith not striking out too much, an 18% strikeout rate. So for his long-term future, we can at least say he's making an average amount of contact, 35% hard hit rate, and a 6.5% barrel rate. Both of those are below average, but they're not bottom of the scale. There's just not a lot to get excited about here. It just looks like Colt Keith is a bench infielder, and that if you turn all the knobs and make them all a little bit better, even the best case version is somebody who's a pretty unremarkable average starter. Was he supposed to be a star, or is a pretty unremarkable all-around average player all we were ever going to get, though?
I guess, yeah, maybe a slightly above just average player now that I, think about it like a little bit more because he didn't have like wow power and he doesn't steal bases. So yeah, maybe he just got a little bit overhyped because we got excited because a player got an extension. That's great. They're getting paid. So maybe we were just a little bit too excited, sadly.
Yeah, don't want to write off his long-term future, certainly after 73 games, but there's not nothing here that I see as very exciting, that's for sure. One more guy who I thought was supposed to be better, Evan Carter. Excited us all last year with an outstanding September and playoff run. And then this year, well, he's missed some time to injury, so it's only 45 games, so we can't just double his homer and steals totals, but 5 homers, 2 steals, and man, only hitting 188 is Evan Carter, a 633 OPS on the season. I thought Evan Carter was this like surprisingly advanced, mature beyond his years hitter who was going to be a solidly average, if not better, regular right away. It seems like we should throw some cold water on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that he's, this bad. I mean, he has a 227 BABIP, which is laughably low. But I think us as fantasy managers just bought into what he did in September in the playoffs. It was absolutely fantastic. So I think that he could be a player that you don't mind, like in a 5 outfield league. If he's like your 4th outfielder, that would be fine. Like that, going forward, that's fine. But yeah, I don't think that he was going to be what he showed off in the playoffs because that was an insane run.
Right, and what was the shape of his production supposed to be when we were very pro Evan Carter? Was he a all-around type? Was he a hit over power mostly? What type of star outfielder were we expecting?
Yeah, definitely hits over power. So those 5 home runs that he hit in 23 games last year, that was absolutely insane. He was definitely in a very mature hitter coming up through the minors. I mean, he's only 21, so he's just always been able to like put the bat on the ball, play, good defense, and a lot of evaluators thought that he would grow into power. But I don't think that he's just gonna, he's definitely not gonna win like a home run record or anything like that. Like, I think that he's just like an okay player. He's not currently an okay player, but I think that he'll get back to being who he was supposed to be, which is more hit over power type of outfielder.
Yeah, he had good strikeout rates in the minors, but now, even last year in that September, he did strike out 32% of the time. And this
Yeah.
year it's 26.5%. So is that now at 28% for his major league career, which is not what you want for a guy who's supposed to have a good hit tool. And his hard hit rate has collapsed this year, too. Certainly plenty of time for him to get back to being that player, but I'm a little bit worried, as you are as well, that maybe the hype was a little bit too much. Let's move on to finish the show with some guys who I couldn't put in either category. We'll start with a handful of players who I think are having pretty normal rookie seasons. These are prospects who, as far as I could tell, were supposed to be pretty good to future stars, somewhere in that range, and they're playing pretty well, but aren't necessarily current stars just yet. I think, is that a fair way to describe Colton Cowser? Pretty high potential guy and definitely doing some things well this year, but not necessarily fully actualized star just yet. Hitting only .227, but 12 homers and 5 steals. Pretty solid rookie season, I would say, for Cowser.
Yeah, definitely. Coming up through the minors, I was kind of worried about him because he ran extremely high strikeout rates, and I just never thought that he would hit enough. And I'm guessing we're seeing that, but he still has 12 home runs, and 5 steals. That's pretty good. I think what might be hurting him actually is the team he plays on. The Orioles are so good. They can take him out. They can put him on the bench for a couple of days to rotate, either Heston Kjerstad or anyone else. So I think, going forward, he's going to have to get back on like that hot streak that he had earlier in the season to get that everyday playing time again. I don't know if we're going to see that, but again, it's still been a very good rookie year for Colton Cowser.
What were the reports on his defense coming up as through the minors? Because I see he's been spending some time in center, but not the majority of his time in center, which for some guys, that's because they're a fringy center fielder. So they spend some of their time in center field. And for some guys, it's because they would be a center fielder for a lot of teams, but there's someone else on the team. And if Cowser is that second version, then for his future, that makes him even more exciting because it means that the bar for his offense, even on that very talented roster, is a little bit lower if he's a legitimate good center fielder. So which one of those would you call him?
I would call him a good center fielder. I just don't think that he's going to play there a lot now, but eventually I think that he could definitely, stick it in center field.
All right, so Colton Cowser having a good season, not a great one, but a good season, pretty much in the way we would have expected him to have a good season. Nice to have some logic and order after a very disordered episode so far. Let's stick with guys doing, I think, what they were supposed to be doing. Ceddanne Rafaela was supposed to be a good defender with a questionable bat, and he has been a good defender with a questionable bat, also with 10 steals, helping out his fantasy value, 8 homers, too. Despite just a 660 OPS, a 243 batting average. Is it right to put Rafaela in this category, living up to expectations and not exactly sure what that means going forward?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Full disclosure, I'm a Red Sox fan, but I am like the anti-homer. I usually think worse about my team's players. So I didn't expect him to stay up as long as he did. Maybe it helped, maybe because of the injuries. Maybe that makes sense. Coming up through the minors, he was extremely aggressive. He just swings at everything, and that's currently what he is doing. He does get on his hot streaks, but he's a good fantasy player because he brings power and speed. I don't know if the average is ever going to be nice to look at. He's very Christopher Merrill-ish. So that's kind of like what I'm expecting him to be. I do love his defense is amazing. Like I love watching him, play center field, and he can play on the infield dirt as well. So he's a real good real life player because everything that he does. And I guess maybe a good fantasy player because he brings those home runs and steals. But I don't know. Guys like this scare me because he's so aggressive, and pitchers are going to learn that and then exploit that. So these types of players scare me. But yeah, he's doing kind of what I thought he was going to do.
Yeah, the combination of a 26% strikeout rate and a 3% walk rate. There's not many players who do that over the course of their career and have long and successful careers. The ones that do have elite gloves, so Rafaela could do it. But it sounds like you're saying don't expect him to suddenly break out at the plate. And that matches up, I think, with what he's done so far. On a similar note, but with better bat so far, is Masyn Winn. Also supposed to be, I would think, a glove first shortstop with something of a bat, and that's who he's been. But he's actually had an above average bat by WRC plus 109 there. Pretty much singles. He's hitting 289, only 4 homers, 8 steals. So modest fantasy contributions due to only medium speed and not really a lot of power. Am I right in saying that this is basically right in line for expectations with Winn, or is this maybe even better bat than I give him credit for?
I mean, I wasn't expecting him to have 4 home runs this year. So now that he has 4 home runs in like around the halfway point, that's pretty impressive. But no, I think this is kind of like what I expected. His average is a little bit higher also than I expected. So maybe he can come, maybe I expect him to come down a little bit. But I think this is what you're going to have, like a 260, 270 hitter, not too many home runs, maybe some steals if he sticks up at the top of the Cardinals lineup. But yeah, this is kind of just who he is. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess like we were talking about with Jacob Young earlier, not an elite strikeout rate, a good one, 20%, means that you'd expect a good chance at above average batting average because he's putting enough balls in play, but this is not some elite contact player.
Right.
Was he just young? Is he supposed to eventually have that kind of hit tool, or is it always supposed to be a fringy bat at best?
I mean, he was projected to have like an above average bat, so maybe he's just young. And again, like baseball's hard, and he's only 22, and he's still holding his own in the majors, which is, impressive. So maybe the bat does come along. I was just always like a little bit skeptical of that because I'm just like, I haven't really seen it. So, but yeah, I could, evaluate is much better than I am at knowing all this stuff. So if they think that, then I'm like, okay, maybe that's true.
All right, so good start for Winn. We'll see if there's anything more to follow. And let's wrap things up with a couple prospects who are already superstars, I think I would say. And they were expected to be very good. I don't know if they were expected to be the best pitchers in baseball. You might be able to guess who the first guy here is. Paul Skenes. I think everybody said he was outstanding, but I don't think they said he was going to be quite this guy. I mean, maybe, but a 34% strikeout rate, a 5% walk rate, a 2.06 ERA, a 1.03 whip through his first 9 starts. That's the best pitcher in baseball type run.
Yeah.
Was that the pitcher Skenes is supposed to be? I think so. That was my understanding, is that this is not just the best prospect this year. This is, the best pitching prospect of the decade type guy.
Yeah. That's kind of what he was thought to be. And I think he is showing it. I mean, he has been outstanding. I think I've watched every single one of his starts because he's just like, he's really, really fun to watch. So yeah, I think that he is honestly like top 10 starter going forward. The Pirates might play with his innings like they were doing with Jared Jones. So so you might not get as many starts down, in August and September as you were expecting, but no, this guy is like number 1 pitcher material, and he's showing it, and I think he's going to continue to show it. He is outstanding.
Do you think it's any coincidence that the super hyped pitcher hit the ground running and the super hyped hitters this year? Granted, nobody was hyped quite like Skenes, I don't think, but guys like Langford and Holiday and Chourio, they aren't hitting the ground running. I mean, we talk sometimes about the fact that pitching is proactive, hitting's reactive. So a pitcher like Skenes, you just get up on the mound and keep throwing. I mean, nobody hits his stuff anyway. It doesn't really matter who's standing in the box. He's still doing the same motion he did in the minors, whereas these hitters, like you mentioned, it's the toughest hitting they've ever faced, and it's actually a different thing to hit a major league pitch than to hit a minor league pitch.
Yeah, and then in the upper minors, they're playing with the automatic balls and strikes, so the strike zone is a tad bit different, and then you come up here and it's real people doing it instead of a machine, or like if you have like a challenge system or something. So yeah, I think it's not necessarily surprising that the younger pitchers, prospect pitchers, are having a little bit of an easier go than the hitters.
All right, let's wrap things up with one more pitcher. Masyn Miller still qualifies as a rookie this season, despite making 10 appearances last year. Miller converted full-time to relief prior to this season and is maybe the best reliever in baseball. 1.96 ERA, 0.79 WHIP, and do you know his strikeout rate?
Off the top of my head, I do not.
47%.
That is
not bad. Nearly a coin flip. Yeah, not bad. And so I know that Miller was supposed to be a good pitcher with good stuff as a prospect. I assume no self-respecting prospect analyst is going to project anyone for a 47% strikeout rate. But is this close to what Miller was supposed to be, right? He was a high strikeout starting pitcher who, if he moves to the bullpen, look out.
Yeah. The thing with Miller was he spent so much time on the injured list coming up through the minors. I didn't think that he was going to be a starter because I'm like, he can't stay healthy. But, he did it for a little bit last season, which was really cool to see. But yeah, I think he's going to be a full-time reliever now. And yeah, this is like what he was doing in the minor leagues. It's like major league hitters. He's like, doesn't matter. I'll just strike him out as whatever. So yeah, I think he is definitely like the best reliever, like closer in the majors. Yeah.
Yeah, no real reason to doubt it. His minor league numbers were absolutely ridiculous, although they all come in the tiniest of samples. As you mentioned, he was on the injured list a lot. Just looking at his highest innings total at any minor league stop for Masyn Miller was 12. So we really did not know a lot about him other than he struck out basically everybody he faced and couldn't stay healthy. And hey, that's been exactly Masyn Miller. That's going to wrap up our tour of the rookies today. Hopefully we hit on everybody that you were curious about. We've got a handful who maybe were supposed to be this good after all. We just weren't thinking about them as much in draft season. We've got a handful that we think are going to be better in the future. We've got some that we are a little bit worried were maybe a bit overhyped. Thank you for helping me go through all that, Shelly. Where can people find you and your work?
Yeah, you can find me over on the Pitcher List network, like podcast network. I do a podcast with Sarah Sanchez called Fantasy Feud. Comes out every Wednesday, I believe.
Very good show. I recommend it.
Yes, you were on it, and it was a great time.
That's true. I think I recommended that people draft Matt McLean like 24 hours before he got surgery. So exactly. Still a good show, though.
Yes. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter at ShellyV_643.
All right. Thank you very much, Shelly. And thank you, listeners and commenters. And the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast brought to you by Pick Six. We'll be back tonight with Jeff and Scott going over tonight's fab. Thank you, everybody. And I'll be back next weekend.